Welcome to this deep dive.
We're really thrilled to have you joining us today.
Yeah, exactly. If you ever find yourself just, staring at a wall of chaotic breaking news alerts,
Oh, the constant
right?
notifications.
The conflicting social media threads, the sensationalized headlines, and you're just sitting there wondering what the actual truth of a situation is, well, you have found your sanctuary.
That's what we're here for.
The premise of this show is straightforward, but honestly incredibly necessary. We take a massive stack of source materials.
The raw data.
Yeah, the raw data, dense forensic reports, localized news coverage, on-the-ground investigative notes. We take all of that and we synthesize it.
We basically do the heavy lifting of parsing through all that noise.
Exactly, so you can walk away as the most well-informed person in the room. And today we are examining an event that has just completely dominated the news cycle.
That's been everywhere.
Everywhere. Since it occurred yesterday, Sunday, March 8th, 2026.
The target was the Beverly Hills estate of Robin Rihanna Fenty.
Right. And given her level of global ubiquity, the immediate media reaction was just, well, it was a frenzy of speculation.
Unprecedented levels of noise, yeah.
Yeah. So our goal today is to cut right through that noise. And to do this, we're relying on a really robust collection of sources. We've got the localized breaking news reports from the LA Times, NBC, FOX 11 Los Angeles, CBS LA.
And we're also incorporating the international perspective, too.
Yes, from The Guardian, Global News, and CTV News. But the real foundation, the core of our discussion today, rests on two critical pieces of primary source material.
These are the game changers.
Absolutely. First, we have the actual Los Angeles Police Department radio dispatch audio from the exact minutes during and immediately following the incident.
Which is chilling to listen to.
Very. And second, and probably most crucially, we have a comprehensive forensic and criminological analysis.
And what's great about that document is it completely removes the celebrity gossip lens.
Right. It doesn't care about the fame aspect in a tabloid sense. It approaches the event as a stark case study.
A case study in tactical threat assessment, ballistics, and just the terrifying realities of modern residential vulnerabilities.
So our mission for this deep dive is to reconstruct the precise, minute-by-minute timeline of this assault. We are going to examine the forensic ballistics.
To really understand what physically happens when military-style weaponry is deployed against luxury residential architecture.
Exactly. We will analyze the judicial response, specifically decoding the mechanics behind that unprecedented $10.2 million bail.
And the formal attempted murder charges.
Right. And finally, we're going to look at the massive ripple effects this single event is going to have on the future of executive protection. Okay, let's unpack this. Can you set the scene for us and establish the tactical timeline of what actually occurred yesterday afternoon?
Yeah, absolutely. So to fully grasp the nature of this event, we really have to start with the environment and the timing.
Okay.
We are looking at the Beverly Crest neighborhood. Specifically, this falls within the Beverly Hills post office jurisdiction.
Which is, for anyone not from LA, an ultra-luxury enclave.
Highly exclusive. It's known for sprawling estates, a very heavy private security presence, and intense privacy. But the key here is that the attack did not occur under the cover of darkness.
No, not at all.
The timeline in the forensic report narrows the assault to a highly specific window. Sunday afternoon, between 1:15 p.m. and 1:21 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time.
So Sunday afternoon in early March in Southern California. The environmental visibility would be absolute.
Broad daylight.
Broad daylight. You have residents out, weekend traffic, delivery drivers navigating those narrow canyon roads. I mean, it is the antithesis of a stealth operation.
And that timing is one of the most glaring indicators of the suspect's mindset.
How so?
Well, when an attacker chooses broad daylight in a densely populated, highly monitored area, it demonstrates a complete disregard for traditional evasion tactics.
Like they don't care if they get seen.
Exactly. It signals an overt, mission-focused objective. Completing the act of violence supersedes the desire to escape unseen. Now, the LAPD quickly identified the suspect as 35-year-old Ivana Lisette Ortiz. She's originally from Orlando, Florida.
A long way from home.
Right. And her arrival at the location reveals a really high degree of premeditative strategy. She did not utilize a vehicle typically associated with a clandestine getaway.
You mean like no missing license plates, no heavily tinted, out-of-place rental van?
Exactly. None of those red flags. She arrived at the location driving a white Tesla.
which, if you know the Hollywood Hills and Beverly Crest, is essentially the unofficial community vehicle.
It really is.
It is the most unremarkable car you could possibly choose for that specific geography.
What's fascinating here is how the criminological analysis categorizes that specific choice. They refer to it as social camouflaging.
Social camouflaging, I like that term.
It's very accurate. In wealthy, environmentally conscious Southern California neighborhoods, luxury electric vehicles are ubiquitous. They serve as a demographic marker of belonging.
So she just fit right in.
Perfectly. By utilizing a white Tesla, Ortiz effectively cloaked herself in the mundane. She neutralized any visual threat indicators.
Which allowed her to just sit there.
Right. It allowed her to park directly across the street from the primary entrance of the Fenty Mayor's estate. She was able to sit in that vehicle without triggering the suspicion of passing neighborhood patrol vehicles or even the automated perimeter security systems.
She weaponized normalcy.
Exactly. Right up until the second she initiated the assault.
So we have the suspect positioned across the street, blending in perfectly. The timeline puts us right around 1:15 p.m. What do the LAPD dispatch records and the forensic timeline tell us about the actual deployment of the weapon?
So from the vantage point inside, or maybe immediately adjacent to the Tesla, Ortiz deployed an AR-15-style semi-automatic rifle.
Just right there on the street.
Right there. The audio and forensic analysis indicates a rapid-fire sequence. She discharged between 7 and 10 rounds directed squarely at the property.
7 to 10 rounds.
And the entire kinetic phase of the attack lasted only moments. By 1:21 p.m., the gunfire ceased, and the suspect vehicle immediately departed, heading south on Coldwater Canyon Drive.
Coldwater Canyon, I mean, that is one of the primary arteries connecting the San Fernando Valley to Beverly Hills.
It's heavily trafficked.
Even on a Sunday, it's a winding, busy road. The chaos that must have erupted in those initial moments is hard to overstate. A sudden barrage of high-velocity rifle fire in an environment engineered for absolute quiet.
The disruption was immediate. And because of the location, the law enforcement response was instantaneous.
I can imagine.
The 911 switchboards received multiple calls simultaneously, starting right at 1:45 p.m. By 1:24 p.m.
Wait, that's just 3 minutes later.
A mere 3 minutes after Ortiz began her descent down the canyon. By 1:24 p.m., LAPD dispatch was already broadcasting the suspect vehicle description and its last known trajectory to all available units.
The sources really emphasized the speed of that apprehension. They didn't just set up a perimeter, they actively hunted the vehicle down using a massive technological dragnet. How did they close the gap so quickly?
When dealing with an active shooter fleeing a heavily monitored jurisdiction, the LAPD utilizes a fully integrated surveillance apparatus. They immediately inputted the description of the white Tesla into the city's automated license plate reader network.
The ALPR.
Yes, the ALPR. These are cameras mounted on traffic poles and patrol cars that constantly scan and log license plates.
So they basically had eyes everywhere.
Exactly. Combined with municipal traffic surveillance cameras and the immediate deployment of the Air Support Division, they established a real-time visual on the vehicle.
The helicopters found her.
The LAPD helicopters tracked the Tesla as it exited the canyon system and moved north into the San Fernando Valley. At 1:45 p.m., ground units, guided by that aerial tracking, located the vehicle at the Sherman Oaks Galleria parking facility.
The Sherman Oaks Galleria, that's a massive commercial and retail complex. It's roughly 8 miles away from the Beverly Crest location. That's a significant distance to cover while navigating Los Angeles traffic. But the timeline shows they had her pinned down incredibly fast.
The efficiency of the pursuit was critical. It prevented the suspect from abandoning the vehicle and disappearing into a crowded commercial space.
Which could have been a nightmare.
An absolute nightmare. At 1:51 p.m., just over 30 minutes after the final round was fired at the estate, LAPD officers apprehended Ivana Lisette Ortiz without further violence.
30 minutes.
A subsequent search of the white Tesla yielded the primary weapon, the AR-15 style rifle, along with corroborating ballistic evidence that linked her directly to the scene in Beverly Hills.
30 minutes from the Hollywood Hills to a tactical takedown in a mall parking lot. The operational speed is remarkable. But while that apprehension was unfolding in the valley, a separate team of investigators was back at the estate, right?
Dealing with the physical aftermath, yes.
And this is where the reporting shifts from a tactical pursuit to a terrifying physical reality. What did the forensic teams uncover at the point of impact?
So the initial sweep of the street outside the residence resulted in the recovery of 7 specific casings.
Okay.
The forensic report classifies these as assault rifle casings, providing the immediate ballistic link to the weapon recovered in Sherman Oaks. The investigators mapped the trajectory of the rounds, identifying the primary impact zones.
Where did they hit?
Multiple visible bullet holes were documented in the property's heavy exterior security gate, as well as an RV that was parked in the driveway.
Now, if the damage had been contained to the street, the gate, and the driveway, this would be a story about extreme vandalism and a localized panic. But the forensic analysis revealed something far more severe.
Much more severe.
The trajectory didn't stop at the perimeter. The reports confirm that at least one of those rifle rounds completely penetrated a structural exterior wall of the mansion itself.
It went right through.
And the most critical piece of context here, Rihanna was confirmed to be inside the home when that structural penetration occurred.
That singular detail, the breaching of the home's structural envelope, fundamentally alters the severity of the event.
It transitions the incident from a perimeter security breach to a direct, lethal threat against the occupants.
Exactly. And to understand how a bullet fired from across the street can punch right through a luxury estate, we have to examine the specific ballistics involved.
Let's do that, because I think people hear AR-15 and they know it's bad, but they don't understand the physics.
Right. So the weapon recovered was an AR-15 style platform. These rifles are chambered to fire high-velocity cartridges, most commonly the .223 Remington or the 5.56 by 45 millimeter NATO round.
Okay.
Now, these are relatively small projectiles in terms of diameter and mass, especially when you compare them to traditional hunting calibers or large-bore handguns.
So if the bullet itself is relatively small, what makes it so devastatingly effective at penetrating barriers that we assume are solid?
It is entirely a function of kinetic energy and velocity. A 5.56 millimeter round exits the muzzle of the rifle at speeds often exceeding 3,000 feet per second.
3,000 feet per second.
It's incredibly fast. When a projectile is traveling at that extreme velocity, it carries an immense amount of kinetic energy. In a military context, that velocity is engineered to defeat light barriers and maintain lethal ballistics over long distances.
Right, it's designed for combat.
Exactly. So when you introduce that kind of kinetic energy into a civilian residential environment, the results are catastrophic.
Because our houses aren't built for combat.
Not at all. The security gates common to Beverly Hills and Bel Air are primarily designed for access control, visual privacy, and aesthetic grandeur.
They look imposing.
They look imposing, yes. They are built from wrought iron, standard steel tubing, or heavy wood, but they are not constructed from ballistic-rated armor plating.
They just don't have the density.
They simply do not possess the material density to arrest a high-velocity 5.56 millimeter projectile.
So the gate essentially functioned as visual concealment, not actual physical cover. The illusion of security was shattered the moment the trigger was pulled.
Precisely the issue. The rounds carried enough kinetic energy to perforate the metal of the gate, pass through the exterior of the RV, and continue toward the main structure of the house.
That is terrifying.
And we also have to consider standard luxury residential architecture. Homes in Southern California, even these sprawling mansions, are largely constructed using wood framing, exterior stucco, insulation, and interior drywall.
Normal building materials.
Right. None of these materials, either alone or layered together in standard construction, offer any meaningful resistance to rifle fire.
A bullet just sails through.
A 5.56 round will pass cleanly through an exterior stucco wall, travel across an interior room, and can easily penetrate subsequent interior walls before its energy is finally depleted.
Which brings up the most pressing question regarding the occupants. The sources explicitly confirm that no one inside the home was physically injured.
Thank goodness.
Truly. We know Rihanna was present. While the reports don't specify the exact locations of her partner, AAP Rocky, or their 3 children, given that it's a Sunday afternoon at their primary family residence, the probability of multiple family members being on the property is incredibly high.
Very high.
So how does a high-velocity rifle round enter an occupied living space without causing a casualty? Did they just get lucky?
Well, the criminological report points to 2 primary factors that dictate survival in these specific scenarios. The first factor is pure geographical probability within the footprint of the estate.
That's the size of the house.
Exactly. These properties in Beverly Crest are massive. They often span tens of thousands of square feet across multiple wings and levels.
Right.
If the occupants were located in a wing of the home facing away from the street, or deep within the interior corridors on a different elevation, the incoming rounds may have exhausted their kinetic energy or embedded into structural beams before reaching the populated areas.
It's terrifying to think that survival could come down to simply being in the kitchen instead of the front living room.
It is a harrowing thought.
But the analysis also suggests that highly secure homes might have architectural countermeasures built in for exactly this reason, right?
Yes, the second and highly probable scenario involves the utilization of internal safe rooms.
Like panic rooms.
Essentially, yes. In the realm of ultra-high net worth executive protection, relying solely on perimeter gates is considered insufficient. Security architectures often include hardening specific interior zones.
What does that entail?
These rooms are retrofitted with ballistic-resistant fiberglass panels, Kevlar-lined wall structures, and heavy multi-point locking steel doors. They are designed to serve as an impenetrable core in the event of an armed home invasion or an exterior ballistic assault.
So if they heard the shots.
If the estate's security protocols dictated an immediate lockdown and movement to a hardened interior space at the first acoustic signature of gunfire, that structural reinforcement is what stood between the family and the incoming rounds.
Regardless of whether it was spatial luck or hardened architecture, the reality is that the threat successfully entered the home.
It did.
And that requires us to pivot our focus to the individual responsible. We need to analyze the suspect profile and the profound psychological drivers behind this kind of targeted violence.
It's a very dark psychological profile.
Following her apprehension, the LAPD booked Ivana Lisette Ortiz on Monday, March 9th. The formal charge is attempted murder.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, the bail.
The bail was set by the magistrate at $10,225,000.
$10.2 million. The magnitude of that bail amount cannot be overstated.
It's massive. A $10.2 million bail is not a standard figure, even within the context of serious felony charges in Los Angeles County.
Right.
It is an actively punitive and preventative number. It's designed to ensure the suspect remains incarcerated pending trial.
To put that in perspective for you listening, a standard charge for discharging a firearm might carry a bail in the low six figures.
Easily.
To jump to over $10 million requires the court to view the suspect through a very specific lens.
The judicial system is communicating its threat assessment through that figure. It establishes two primary conclusions reached by the district attorney's office.
Which are?
First, they have categorized Ortiz as an extreme flight risk. As a resident of Orlando, Florida, she has no demonstrated ties to the Los Angeles area.
She could just vanish.
If she were to secure release on a lower bail, the probability of her fleeing the jurisdiction is exceedingly high.
And the second conclusion?
Second, and far more critical to the community, the bail amount reflects the court's belief that Ortiz represents a massive, highly lethal, and ongoing threat.
They think she'll try again.
Or pose a danger to others, yes. The legal standard for setting bail that high requires a demonstrable belief that releasing the individual would result in an immediate danger to the victims or the public.
When you map out the sheer logistics of the attack, that level of perceived danger is completely validated. Let's look at the geography. We have a suspect whose primary residence is in Orlando, Florida, executing an attack in Beverly Hills, California.
The geographical disparity is a central component of the criminological analysis. The report characterizes this as a heavily mission-oriented journey.
Mission-oriented.
The suspect had to traverse the entire continental United States with a singular objective.
And we can't ignore the logistics of the weaponry, which indicate profound premeditation.
Ortiz either transported an AR-15-style semi-automatic rifle across multiple state lines.
Which means navigating the varying transport laws of each jurisdiction.
Exactly. Or she arrived in California and managed to acquire the weapon locally.
And given California's strict firearm purchasing regulations and waiting periods, acquiring a rifle of that nature as an out-of-state resident requires significant planning.
Illicit connections, deliberate circumvention of the law. You don't just walk into a store and walk out with that weapon on a whim.
Right. Either scenario requires a level of dedication, financial resources, and sustained focus that completely rules out a sudden crime of passion. This was a heavily logistical, calculated operation.
Very calculated.
Which leads us to the core psychological question. What is the catalyst? What motivates a 35-year-old woman to travel thousands of miles to launch a ballistic assault on a global icon?
While law enforcement hasn't released a formalized motive based on interrogations yet, the criminological analysis relies on established behavioral models for this specific type of targeted celebrity violence.
What did the models point to?
They point heavily toward a phenomenon known as a deeply fractured parasocial relationship.
Parasocial relationship. Can you explain that for those who might not be familiar?
Sure, we have to look at the victim's position in society.
Right.
The target is not just a public figure. She is a cornerstone of global pop culture and the head of a massive, universally recognized corporate empire.
Her imagery, her personal milestones, her family life are constantly disseminated across global media platforms.
Exactly. For millions of people, this creates a standard, harmless fan experience. You feel like you know them.
But for a very specific, vulnerable psychological profile, that constant media consumption morphs into something entirely different. The brain starts to process that one-sided media barrage as a genuine reciprocal relationship.
And that is exactly the mechanism the report describes. It becomes parasocial extremism.
Extremism.
The individual develops a deeply held, entirely delusional belief that they share a personal, intimate connection with the celebrity.
And what happens when reality breaks that delusion?
That's the trigger point. When reality inevitably fails to align with that delusion, perhaps the celebrity gets married, has children, or simply exists in a way that the individual feels contradicts their imagined bond. The fixation curdles into a profound perceived grievance.
They feel betrayed.
Deeply betrayed. The individual begins to feel slighted or ignored by someone they believe owes them recognition. The violence becomes a mechanism to force that recognition.
To forcefully insert themselves into the narrative of the target's life.
Right.
The sources also touch on a secondary psychological driver that frequently overlaps with these parasocial grievances, which they term the desire for fame through infamy.
It is a really dark facet of modern celebrity obsession. The attacker recognizes the target's immense platform. By launching an attack against a highly visible, universally known figure in a location as symbolic as Beverly Hills, the attacker guarantees absolute global attention.
The victim is chosen not merely for who they are, but for the size of the megaphone their tragedy will command.
Exactly. The act of violence is designed to inextricably link the attacker's name with the global icon forever.
It fundamentally reframes how we think about the concept of fame. We consume celebrity culture as entertainment, but the reality for the individuals at the center of it is that their visibility makes them a constant beacon for severe psychological instability.
They become lightning rods.
The mere act of existing on a global stage can trigger an obsession in someone living 3,000 miles away, culminating in a cross-country journey and high-velocity rifle fire.
It's a terrifying reality.
And because the behavior is so extreme and the potential for loss of life was so high, the legal system is responding with maximum force. We need to decode the specific charges.
The legal framework here is critical.
The LAPD booked Ortiz for attempted murder. Now, looking at the raw facts of the day that no one was physically struck by the gunfire, some observers might wonder why the prosecution didn't opt for a lesser, perhaps easier to prove charge, like severe property vandalism or discharging a weapon into an inhabited dwelling.
Which are serious charges, but not attempted murder.
Right. How does the district attorney justify jumping straight to the top of the penal code?
It requires a highly specific application of the law. The legal analysis provided in the sources breaks down the California Penal Code requirements for an attempted murder conviction.
Okay.
To secure a guilty verdict, the prosecution cannot rely on the sheer terror of the event. They must prove two distinct, stringent elements beyond a reasonable doubt.
Let's walk through those elements. What is the first hurdle the prosecution has to clear?
The first requirement is demonstrating what the law defines as a direct step. The prosecution must prove that the defendant moved beyond mere preparation or planning and took a direct, definitive, but ultimately ineffective action toward the specific goal of killing another human being.
It has to be the mechanism of death put into motion.
Yes.
And this is exactly where the physical forensic evidence we discussed earlier transitions into the cornerstone of the criminal trial.
It is the absolute linchpin. If Ortiz had arrived at the location and simply fired the rifle into the air as a form of extreme intimidation, or if every single round had impacted the heavy metal gate and stopped, a defense attorney would have a strong argument.
They would argue she was committing severe vandalism or making a threat, but had not taken a direct step toward ending a life because the lethal force never entered the space where life existed.
Exactly. However, the forensic documentation proving that at least one 5.56 millimeter round penetrated the structural envelope of the mansion and entered the interior living space completely nullifies that defense.
Because it went inside.
The prosecution will use that ballistic trajectory to satisfy the direct step requirement. She sent a lethal projectile directly into an occupied environment.
That structural penetration essentially seals the first element. What is the second element the state must prove to secure the attempted murder conviction?
The second element is the psychological component, intent to kill, which the California legal system formally terms malice aforethought.
Malice aforethought.
The prosecution must definitively prove that when Ortiz squeezed the trigger of that rifle, her specific premeditated goal was the cessation of human life.
Proving a state of mind is notoriously difficult. Without a written manifesto or a recorded confession explicitly stating her intentions, how does a prosecutor convince a jury of what was happening inside her head at 1:25 p.m.?
They construct the intent through the totality of her logistical and tactical decisions.
The whole picture.
Right. The district attorney will build a narrative based on the sequence of events. They will argue that an individual does not travel from Florida to California, expend the resources to acquire a high-velocity military-style weapon, utilize social camouflage to approach an estate, and intentionally discharge a concentrated volley of 7 to 10 rounds into an inhabited structure unless their explicit desire is to inflict fatal injury.
And the choice of weapon is critical here.
An AR-15 is not typically utilized for sending a warning. The volume of fire, the trajectory aimed at the main house, and the massive logistical effort to arrive at that moment all speak to an undeniable lethal intent.
The sources also detail how the core attempted murder charge is likely to be compounded by a series of severe legal enhancements. These are mechanisms within the penal code that can drastically multiply a potential prison sentence.
Yes, the forensic and legal analysis outlines several specific enhancements that the district attorney's office will almost certainly pursue.
What's the first one?
The first is the standard enhancement for personal use of a firearm during the commission of a felony. That carries mandatory consecutive sentencing.
Okay, that makes sense.
Furthermore, the specific classification of the weapon triggers deeper consequences. Because an AR-15 style rifle falls under different statutory definitions than a standard handgun, the prosecution will likely apply enhancements related to the use of an assault weapon.
Which does what to the sentence?
It dramatically restricts the possibility of early parole and increases the baseline sentencing grid.
There is also the deeply concerning factor regarding the occupants of the home. We know the family includes 3 children under the age of 4. How does their presence impact the legal strategy?
It provides the prosecution with one of the most severe enhancements available, the targeting of a vulnerable occupant.
Wow.
If the ensuing investigation can prove that Ortiz, through her obsessive monitoring of the family, knew or reasonably should have known that an infant and toddlers resided in the home and were likely present on a Sunday afternoon, the state will heavily leverage that fact.
Because it shows an even darker intent.
Firing high-velocity rounds into a structure known to house extreme vulnerabilities demonstrates a level of depravity and malice that juries and judges punish with maximum available sentences.
It is a staggering amount of legal jeopardy, and, given the facts, entirely warranted. But to truly understand the gravity of this attack, we have to contextualize it within the victim's history.
Right, because this is a pattern.
Because this is not the first time Rihanna has had to rely on law enforcement and the judicial system to address a massive security breach at one of her residences.
The criminological report dedicates a significant section to what they term the continuum of threat. It is a vital concept for understanding the unrelenting pressure faced by highly visible figures.
To map this continuum, we have to examine a severe intrusion that occurred in May of 2018.
Let's look at that incident.
The 2018 incident involved a different property, her former residence in the Hollywood Hills. A 27-year-old individual named Eduardo Leon managed to scale the perimeter fencing.
He got right over.
He didn't just trespass on the grounds. He successfully breached the exterior of the home and gained entry. He remained inside the house for 12 hours, unpacking his belongings, essentially waiting for her to arrive.
And fortunately, she was not in Los Angeles at the time. Her assistant eventually discovered him. He was arrested, pleaded no contest to felony stalking, and received a 10-year protective order.
When the forensic analysts compare the behavior of Eduardo Leon in 2018 with the actions of Ivana Ortiz in 2026, they identify a terrifying evolution in the fundamental typology of the threat.
A total shift. The 2018 breach is classified criminologically as pursuit-based harassment.
Pursuit-based.
Leon fit the profile of an obsessive stalker. His ultimate objective, however fractured and frightening his reality was, centered on establishing intimacy and physical proximity.
He wanted to be near her.
He wanted to occupy the same physical space as the target.
He was trying to force a connection by invading her sanctuary. How does the current analysis contrast that with the events of this past Sunday?
The 2026 assault represents a complete paradigm shift. It escalated entirely from pursuit-based harassment to assault-based targeted violence.
Assault-based.
Ortiz demonstrated zero interest in proximity or intimacy. She didn't attempt to scale the gate. She didn't try to enter the home to wait.
She stayed across the street.
She utilized the spatial distance of the public street. She utilized the visual concealment of the Tesla, and she deployed high-powered, distance-based weaponry.
The psychological driver shifted from a desire to be part of the target's life to a desire to unilaterally end it. She was seeking destruction, not connection.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the report notes that this extreme escalation in targeted violence is occurring against a backdrop of increasing vulnerability for affluent properties across the region.
The Fenty Mayor's shooting did not happen in a localized vacuum. It was part of a broader weekend of high-profile security failures.
The analysts draw a parallel to another incident that occurred that same weekend. Just a few miles away in the Bel Air enclave, the residence of celebrity fashion designer Rachel Zoe was targeted by burglars while she was traveling out of state in Las Vegas.
Now, from a criminological standpoint, these are fundamentally different events. The burglary at the Zoe residence was a financially motivated property crime executed by individuals seeking high-value assets.
Right. The shooting at the Fenty Mayor's estate was a psychologically driven act of targeted lethal violence. The motivations do not overlap.
But the outcome, the fundamental vulnerability, is identical. Both incidents resulted in the breach of highly exclusive, incredibly expensive residential sanctuaries.
Precisely. They collectively underscore the persistent, glaring vulnerabilities of ultra-high net worth real estate. These properties serve as highly visible, fixed geographic targets.
Whether a criminal enterprise is seeking financial gain or an unstable individual is seeking to inflict targeted violence, the estates themselves are the focal point of the vulnerability.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? When you synthesize the evolution of the specific stalker threat from proximity to ballistics, and you combine it with the general failure of perimeter security in these luxury enclaves, what is the actionable takeaway for the security industry?
The immediate takeaway is that the traditional paradigms of wealth-based security are failing.
They just aren't working anymore.
The legacy model, a high privacy hedge, an aesthetically pleasing wrought iron gate, and an armed patrol vehicle passing by every hour is entirely obsolete against a modern, determined threat utilizing high-capacity weaponry.
Which brings us to the final analytical portion of our deep dive, the future of executive protection and the imminent shift toward extreme residential hardening.
The ballistic failure of the perimeter at the Beverly Hills estate is going to serve as a mandatory case study for security consultants globally.
Because when a 5.56 round punches through a Beverly Hills security gate in broad daylight and enters a billionaire's living space, the entire industry has to rewrite its protocols.
They have to start from scratch.
How do you actually secure a property against that specific level of threat without turning a family home into a visual military compound?
The goal of modern executive protection is invisible hardening. The report details several massive infrastructural upgrades that will likely become the new baseline for high-profile estates.
Okay, what's the first step?
The first point of failure was the entryway. The industry standard will have to pivot immediately to ballistic-rated gates.
What are those made of?
These are heavily engineered barriers constructed from layered ballistic steel and composite materials, specifically designed to absorb and halt high-velocity rounds like the 5.56 or even the heavier 7.62 millimeter without allowing penetration.
But they still have to look like luxury gates.
That's the architectural challenge, designing these massive, heavy structures to look indistinguishable from standard luxury gates, maintaining the aesthetic of the neighborhood while functioning as tank armor.
But Ortiz didn't just shoot the gate. She shot the structure of the house itself. The bullet went right through the exterior stucco wall. How do you retrofit a sprawling, multi-story mansion to stop rifle fire?
That requires comprehensive structural hardening, which is an incredibly invasive and expensive architectural undertaking. Consultants will advise clients to fundamentally alter the composition of vulnerable exterior-facing walls.
What does that actually look like during construction?
This involves stripping the interior surfaces and installing layers of Kevlar fabric or heavy-gauge ballistic steel paneling directly behind the interior drywall.
So the walls are lined with armor.
Yes. The objective is to create a hidden, impenetrable envelope. Even if a high-velocity round breaches the exterior stucco and the wood framing, it impacts the hidden ballistic layer and is arrested before it can enter the living space.
The sheer cost and architectural complexity of essentially bulletproofing a 30,000 square foot home is staggering.
It's astronomical.
But beyond just absorbing the bullets, how is the technology evolving to actually stop the shooter faster than the 30 minutes it took in this case?
The focus shifts from passive defense to active automated detection. The forensic analysts point to the rapid adoption of acoustic gunshot detection systems within private residential compounds.
Acoustic sensors.
These are arrays of highly sensitive acoustic sensors placed discreetly around the perimeter and roof lines of the property.
And what do they do?
The instant a firearm is discharged, the system's algorithms analyze the acoustic signature, confirm it is gunfire, filtering out false positives like fireworks or heavy construction noises, and instantly triangulate the exact origin point of the shot.
And once the system registers the gunfire, it's not just sending a text message to a security guard, right? It initiates a massive automated response.
The integration is critical. In milliseconds, the system transmits the confirmed threat and the exact GPS coordinates of the shooter directly to local law enforcement dispatch, bypassing the delay of a 911 call.
That saves precious time.
At the same time, it triggers catastrophic lockdown protocols within the estate.
Meaning the house locks itself down.
Heavy ballistic doors automatically slam shut and lock. Automated steel security shutters drop over vulnerable windows, and the occupants are guided by internal alarm systems to the pre-hardened safe rooms we discussed earlier.
It sounds incredibly dystopian. It sounds like a military forward operating base, not a home. And the sheer logistical difficulty of applying that level of security to a dynamic family unit is profound.
It changes everything about how they live.
We are not talking about a single executive who can be isolated. We're talking about a massive family footprint. Rihanna, AOP Rocky, a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 5-month-old infant. They have massive staffs, different schedules, and normal family routines.
Toddlers play on the lawn, families swim in the pool. You cannot maintain a family in a Kevlar-lined bunker 24 hours a day.
The estate is supposed to be the ultimate sanctuary, the one place where they can drop the public persona and exist safely away from the cameras and the crowds. But this event dictates that the sanctuary must now possess the active defensive capabilities of an embassy under siege.
The psychological toll of that reality is immense. When you realize that the simple act of eating breakfast in your own kitchen requires acoustic sensors and ballistic steel to ensure your survival, the fundamental definition of what a home is becomes permanently fractured.
It ceases to be a place of rest and becomes a fortified position. Let's take a moment to synthesize the incredible sequence of events we have analyzed today.
It's a lot to process.
On a Sunday afternoon, March 8, 2026, the illusion of absolute security in Beverly Hills was shattered. 35-year-old Ivana Ortiz, driven by what analysts believe is severe parasocial extremism, completed a cross-country journey from Florida to Los Angeles.
Utilizing the social camouflage of a white Tesla, she positioned herself outside the sprawling estate of global icon Rihanna.
Wielding an AR-15-style rifle, Ortiz unleashed a rapid volley of high-velocity rounds. The attack exposed critical vulnerabilities in luxury residential architecture, as bullets easily penetrated the heavy security gate and terrifyingly breached the structural exterior wall of the mansion while the family was confirmed to be inside.
Thanks to an incredibly rapid multi-divisional response by the LAPD, utilizing advanced automated license plate readers and aerial tracking, Ortiz was hunted down and apprehended in a commercial parking structure 8 miles away within 30 minutes of the assault.
She now faces the severe, life-altering charge of attempted murder, held on an astronomical $10.2 million bail that reflects her extreme danger to the public.
This single event has highlighted a deeply disturbing evolution in celebrity stalking, moving from a desire for proximity to a desire for lethal destruction, and it is actively forcing the multi-million-dollar private security industry to completely rewrite how they protect the world's most visible individuals.
And as we step back and look at the totality of this information, from the terrifying physics of the ballistics to the complex psychology of the attacker to the massive legal ramifications, it raises a critical overarching question that I want you to consider.
We have just spent an hour dissecting the profound vulnerabilities of a billionaire global icon. She resides in one of the most exclusive, heavily monitored, and aggressively patrolled jurisdictions on the planet. Her financial resources for physical security are, for all practical purposes, limitless.
Yet, despite those immense overlapping layers of wealth, location, and private security architecture, her sanctuary was violently breached. It was breached by a high-powered rifle fired from a public street in broad daylight by an individual who simply decided to travel across the country to do it.
If those unparalleled advantages are insufficient to prevent a targeted ballistic assault from reaching the interior walls of a home, we have to ask a profound question about the society we inhabit.
In an era characterized by the hypervisibility of the digital age and the widespread accessibility of high-capacity military-style weaponry, does the concept of a truly safe neighborhood even exist anymore?
Or is the very idea of physical safety, whether you reside behind the gates of a Beverly Hills estate or on a quiet suburban street, merely a fragile illusion, a temporary construct just waiting to be shattered by someone with intent and a firearm?
That is an incredibly heavy, chilling, but absolutely vital question to sit with. It challenges every fundamental assumption we make about wealth, architecture, and the actual limits of personal security in the modern world.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on this deep dive today.
We know we navigated some intensely heavy, complex material, but our ultimate goal is always to equip you with the depth of knowledge necessary to critically evaluate the events shaping our world. Keep asking the hard questions, keep looking far past the sensationalized headlines, and we look forward to having you with us on the next deep dive.